Thank you all for coming. I'm pleased. I'm pleased to have all of us here, and I'm pleased to have all of us, especially the people who are in charge, sitting down and paying attention. Woody. It is 6:03, and I'm calling this public meeting of the Kingston Rent Guidelines Board, this public hearing. Is this better? Good evening. Thank you for coming. It is 6:04, and I'm calling this public hearing of the Kingston Rent Guidelines Board to order. We are meeting here in Kingston City Hall, and I would like to go around and have each of the members of the Rent Guidelines Board say your name and whether you're a property owner representative, a tenant representative, or a member of the public. Starting with you, Tara.
I'm Tara Perry, and I am a property owner representative.
I'm Anthony Tampone, and I am a property owner and community representative.
My name is Mike Brown.
You want to get real close to the microphone.
Right.
Oh, you have to push the button also.
I'm good. There you go. My name is Mike Brown, and I'm a member of the public.
My name's Mia Inoue, and I'm a member of the public.
I'm Noah Kipley-Ogman. I'm a member of the public, and I'm the chair of the board.
I am Diana Lopez, and I am a member of the public.
My name is Carol Soto, and I am a tenant representative.
My name is Michael Tierney, and I'm a tenant representative.
We will begin hearing from members of the public in a moment, but I would like to start by thanking everyone who's come. I so appreciate the folks who have shown up to help inform our work and our deliberations and ensure that that this board can do its job well and responsibly. I'd like to thank also the staff from New York's DHCR who have made this possible and who are tasked with enforcing all of the laws, and also our colleagues at City Hall who have made this space available and are making everything work, and our court reporter who is working very hard to figure out what I'm saying, despite great. Thank you to everybody who's making this possible. I'm going to call folks up to provide testimony. Remember that you have 3 minutes if you're an individual, and you have 5 minutes if you're representing an organization. I have a set of sign-up sheets here. There are more room to sign up at the front of the door. So please do sign up if you would like to provide testimony. Let's start with Mike Caslin.
Good evening. This is my first time speaking to the Rent Control Board or in any public affairs for the city. So I'm excited and a little nervous. I heard a great quote today. When the Lord builds the house, no hands can tear it down. So I ask that when the Lord builds a house, no hands can tear it down. So there's many helping hands in this room. I think there's a whole lot of love in this room, although everyone may not feel it, because there's a love of the ideal of Kingston and how it can thrive and have pride. I am Mike Caslin. I am a small business owner, family business. We own 5 properties. I'm a pride lord. I take great pride in my properties. I take great pride in my tenants. We have an opportunity to move forward together with the right sense of fairness and justice in each way. Our economics are difficult. We've been at this 4 years using our savings that we want to send our daughter to college with. In 4 years, we've had no profit. My wife and I have not taken a salary. How many of you would work for 4 years on a project with no salary? We've rehabbed 16 out of 25 units since we've got here. And the cost for rehabbing a unit has gone from $5,000 to $20,000. Our heating oil bill, just in case you want a data point, just came in. It's $5.89 a gallon, up from $1.89 3 months ago. That's not 8% inflation. That's nearly 300%. So as we are here today, let's not fight each other, okay? Let's understand that some of the largest costs that property owners have are taxes. The city of Kingston wants a 7.3% increase on a $50 million budget. The school system with a $196 million budget, they got a 4.5% increase. And Ulster County has a $379 million budget. So I'm here to say that we can gather, we can cite costs and difficulties as landlords and as tenants together, but we know the house always wins. And the house is who has the money. And so I suggest a third way. And that third way is to create a fund that helps create a trust fund for tenants and landlords. Landlords for improving capital expenses, especially with housing over 74 years of age. Let us work together to create a third way, a 1% revolving trust fund for tenants who need help and landlords who need help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Members of the board, you're welcome to ask questions of people who testify. Members of the board are welcome to ask questions to follow up if they have any. Thank you so much. Charles Sanchez.
My name is Charles Sanchez, last name spelled Sanchis. I'm a resident and tenant in Dutch Village, which is located here in Kingston, which is one of the properties covered by the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. I was previously nominated for the board, but withdrew. I will keep it brief. Unfortunately, a few bad apples can ruin it for everybody. And with that, often you have to take drastic and radical measures. People have had the opportunity to address these issues. Other landlords could have gotten together to look at options such as creating a fund, but we are too far down in the issues. Not only should there be a 2-year look back, there should also be a negative rent adjustment. What's occurred, not only with COVID, but over the past several years here in Kingston, has greatly affected many individuals, many families, some who have already unfortunately been removed from their property. There's a number of illegal activities, from backdating leases, increasing rent after August 1st, which all rents were to be frozen. There's tons of information that's flying around, some which is true, some which is not true. I ask the board members to truly take into consideration both the 2-year look back and a negative rent adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Any questions from members of the board? Arlene Puentes. Never mind. Chanel Marshall. And Anne Marie Curry, you'll be next.
Hello, my name is Chanel Marshall. This is my first time ever speaking. I live in 58 Fair, where my landlord just bought my apartment, and he has not gave me a year lease, but is evicting everyone. Did not give us no time to look for anything. Just serve us with a 14-year notice. The judge didn't want to hear none of our sides. So now I have 2 kids and nowhere to go. I don't think that is totally fair how people are coming up here and buying our properties and just saying, get out, when our families don't have nowhere to go. Nobody's out there being able to help us because too many families is becoming homeless. Nobody else have to deal with this. So we need help. This is not right. Landlords, they think that they can run tenants out, and it's time for the tenants to stand together. We have rights too.
If you're
Michael.
comfortable, can you state the address of your home?
It's 58 Fair Street, Kingston, New York.
Good.
And we fall underneath the tenants' rights. We have 7 units on our in our apartment. We only seen our landlord probably several times so he can show the apartment off to the people. Every time we have contact him for rent money and stuff, he doesn't want to collect it. He just want everybody out.
When were you served a notice?
He contacted us in August, mid-August
Of this year?
of this year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Anne Marie Curry and Jessica Myers, you're next.
Anne Marie Curry, ANN, capital MARIE, capital CURRY. And I am also a tenant of 58 Fair Street. And to back up the tenant that was before us, not only we have not had connection with our landlord, there's people in our building that are on welfare, Repco, or et cetera, for the help towards half of the rent. And he has not been around to do his part as a landlord. So he's sending us to court and lying to the courts and saying all 7 apartments owe the same amount of rent when we are all in different apartments, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and studios, but he is getting us all as owing one amount. And I agree that was my daughter who was here. I totally agree that that's not only wrong for us, that's wrong for everybody. And I know I only have 3 minutes to make the comment on the gentleman that first came up. As a person that you don't own property, I do understand that when you own properties, the time changes. All because time changes doesn't mean that tenants should be used for an issue you choose. You choose to be a landlord. So as landlords, it's your job to make sure that your tenants are being taken care of, not wanting to raise the rent and doing nothing about it. So if taxes go up, you made that issue to be a landlord. That's not my issue. It's my issue to be in your apartment, and do the best I can as a tenant to hold that reliable. And yes, we shouldn't fight against one another. Yes, we should come together, but play your part.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Jessica Myers and Eric Jarman, you're up next.
Hello, my name is Jessica Myers. It's Myers. I live at 305 Hurley. I've been there since September this year, so about 2 months. I am obviously a new person to this area, and I'm super excited to vote this year. I was previously in Brooklyn with my partner. We moved here because I was offered a dream job just across the river at Bard College. What I want you to know is that I almost turned down that job despite the incredibly competitive salary that I was offered and am now making, because it was almost impossible to find anything in the area that my partner and I would be able to afford together. In fact, to make it work, we invited our good friend to move in with us to help share the burden. For context, in Brooklyn, New York, 10 minutes away from the subway, we paid $833 per bedroom. Here, we pay $1,100. And trust me, the Brooklyn apartment was actually a bit more roomier. Many of my colleagues are actually living in housing provided by the college, as they are not as fortunate as me in having extra hands to pay the bills. This is reducing their salary, which is making it harder for them to find a place to live. The three of us are young professionals. We love to spend money on local things, restaurants, gifts for our family, events. However, without a reduction, the three of us are barely able to enjoy movie nights at home without the weight of our bills weighing down on us, much less help stimulate the local economy. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Eric and Phil Erner, you're on deck.
Eric, E-R-I-C, Jarman, J-A-R-M-A-N. Eric Jarman, I reside at Stony Run Apartments since December of 2019 with my family. What I'd like to say is that, first of all, I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank all of the elected officials that took it upon themselves to commission this study. The free market is abusive. It has been abusive. The fact is, when my family and I moved into Stony Run in December of 2019, unbeknownst to us, in this free market for our 2-bedroom apartment, we were already paying 40% more rent for the same amount of square footage than my neighbor across the hall. How do I know this? Is this just conjecture? Well, with everything that's going on, neighbors meeting neighbors, we're actually talking to each other. And we're actually divulging private information that most people keep closely guarded. This is a fight that we're all in together. And so therefore people are actually cooperating. What I'd like to say is also regarding the actual rent. The neighbor that was below us also had the same floor plan as us, 2-bedroom, resided there previously 10 years. During the pandemic, she had to move out because of the current ownership. They started with with the pattern of raising rents, extraordinary measures. I wasn't at the meeting when they first came to actually encourage this body or the body here to change the actual property type to workforce housing. But while, from what I can remember reading history in the newspapers, they were telling the officials that the average rent increase was 5%, when in fact, the average rent increase was actually 11%. How do I know that? Because again, you start talking and meeting people. Downstairs, and I just reached my 3 minutes. Person had moved in and they actually just left, but they were actually paying over $2,000. That's an 80% increase. The only way to solve this problem is regulation. And yes, you do deserve a profit as a landlord, but within reasonable measures. And I would encourage the board to actually have a negative increase. And there's nothing in the statute that says you have to limit it at 2 years. I would encourage a 5-year look back period. Thank you very much. Yes, Noah.
Eric, I'm curious, what time frame were you learning about those 11% rent increases? When were they? Over what period of time? How long has this pattern been happening?
Okay, so I became aware of an article written, I would want to say June, July, which actually then referenced an article in 2021 when acre companies came and bought the property. They actually showed up and actually, stated what I did state. And so it was at that time that I started to ask neighbors, what was your experience? Because in passing, people are basically whistling. If you get my meaning, you see them walking around with leases and whatnot, and you see the terrorizing that's going on.
Thank you. Yeah.
When did your landlord start increasing rents so much?
Okay, so based upon my discovery of that newspaper article, which linked to the first article, okay, and asking folks around the complex, there's 266 units there, I actually discovered that people who were signing leases or renewing leases, okay, these are basically the renewal ones, okay, they were, 11% or more. Okay, so that's a whole 6% percentage points more than what they put before this board. It was not accurate. It was not honest. It was deceptive.
And do you know around when that started happening, the 11% increases?
Well, the owner chose a leasing agent called Gray Star, which is no longer here. And immediately they actually, after, the whole spiel about not having access to the leases from for E&M management, et cetera, right? So there was like where I didn't really hear much from people, like a 2 to 3 month lull. Okay, so we're talking, end of April or so, right? Then you start to hear from your neighbors, about these 11% increases, right? And so, moving on months, a year into the pandemic, et cetera, and there's more and more people that are leaving, when in fact they're actually renovating these units. Doesn't make any sense until you realize what's going on. They're putting these conditions, okay, on actual renewals so they can actually get people to vacate. and then actually increase those units even more. And I would say that until the books are audited, okay, which you're able to do now under law, you couldn't do it in the free market, you will be able to see this. Cold hard facts.
How long have you been living in your unit?
December of 2019.
And how many times has your rent changed since you moved in?
Okay, so we came in, we were offered a 1-year lease through E&M Management. During the pandemic, I, like so many other people, were affected. Self-employment, my wife, employment. Our lease actually expired during the actual emergency, okay? So it got to a point where we actually applied for emergency rental assistance, okay? And so when that was actually approved, the terms are they were supposed to put that back in force, the one that we had, not charge late fees or these month-over-month fees, et cetera, which they continue to do to this very day. So we're still under the original 1-year lease, and our lease is in December, okay? It was the end of July that we got a letter, okay? It was asking us to actually sign, and if anybody wants it, you know, reporter or whatever, you can approach me, okay? I'll make sure you get it. As Carol had mentioned downstairs, an 18% increase right now if you sign now, okay? Or a 40% increase if you don't, and it will be month to month, okay? So that's our particular situation.
And so you haven't actually changed. So you're still under 2019, other than that,
Yes.
seems very aggressive letter.
Yes, we're under the 12-month period with the ERAP. And by the way, I've been told by the current landlord agent that they don't renew ERAP leases, which I know that is bunk now because I've been empowering myself by attending all these public information sessions.
I want to let you know you can submit written comment and include that letter if you'd like to the board. You want to remind everyone here, Noah, how they can do that? Do you have that readily available?
Yes, everyone is welcome to submit a written comment by email to kingstonrgb@hcr.ny.gov. That email address should be available in a variety of places. Ask me if you needed to see it written down.
All right, Junior, consider that done.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you.
Phil Erner and then Peter Klein.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, good evening. My name is Phil Erner. I live at 109 Washington Avenue in the city of Kingston. I'm also the elected county legislator for wards 3, 5, and 9 in the city. And as I look around the room, I see many people here who live in those wards or whom I am to represent on the in the county legislature, both landlords, tenants, and homeowners here. Since 1970 in the United States, working people's wages have stagnated, maybe even decreased slightly, certainly have not kept up with inflation, but the cost of living has risen dramatically. In Ulster County, the cost of housing has gone up about 40% or so. It went up between 2000 and just before the pandemic. And average incomes were more or less flat in that time too. And then the pandemic hit. So And we know there was a great influx of folks into our county and into our city, from folks escaping denser urban areas, especially around New York City. But we also know that the population of our city did not increase correspondingly. So what happened? People were forced out. And that has continued today. And who is forced out? When the market determines the price of housing, it is who can afford to pay the least that has to leave. And so I'm seeing this where the state responded to a crisis before the pandemic in 2019 and mandated notice for rental increases above a certain amount. And then the city of Kingston passed good cause eviction, which enabled all tenants to challenge an increase above 5% if that was the reason that they were being evicted for not paying that larger increase. These legal remedies have not proved enough to stem the bleeding of our people from our communities. So we have before us another legal remedy, which is the first upstate community ever to enact a rent guidelines board after declaring an emergency. And we also, it seems to me, have a historic opportunity to right the wrong of the outrageous increases in rent that we have seen from many of the oldest and biggest buildings here in Kingston. So I support the calls that we've heard from the public for a decrease and a long look back period. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Peter Klein, and then Kathleen Dittis.
So, hi, my name is Peter Klein, K-L-E-I-N, is my last name. I'm an associate professor of sociology and environmental and urban studies over at Bard. Thanks for having me and for this important session. I do research and I teach on civic participation, environmental justice, and importantly for this, urban studies. I teach a lot of classes actually and have students that do work with community members here in Kingston over the last 6 years or so, I would say. And my students have been investigating and doing work with people here on good cause eviction, as was just mentioned. And I've been excited. I was excited to hear that Kingston opted into the Emergency Tenant Protection Act that could possibly reduce rents. Let me just start. I just wanted to give some context of housing security, but I just wanted to start by saying this country, this region, and specifically this city is facing a housing crisis. And a housing affordability crisis. And really this is about housing security. And I could speak at great length as a professor about this and all of the causes, but I just want to provide some numbers to back up all of these wonderful tenant voices that we're hearing from. First of all, housing that is affordable is considered that when folks are not paying more than 30% of their income, and when people are considered cost burden, they're paying between 30 and 50%. And when people are paying more than 50%, you are severely burdened. Now, I ran some back of the envelope numbers today to look at rents in Kingston, what's available, and looked at maps. By the time I'd show you the maps I created, and I can send them to you. And this would mean that a household income that's about $50,000, you shouldn't be paying more than $1,250 per month if you were to fall in that 30%, that affordable housing number. At 25K, which many of the census blocks here, the median income is between 25 and 40K. That's median income. So we're talking about 625 per month should be your median, should be your what you pay on rent, to about $1,000 per month. Now, when I look today at what's available to rent, I don't know if anybody's looked recently or tried to find a place. I think the cheapest studio I found was about $1,200 to $1,300, right? So this means that I would guess, and I need to actually do more research on it, that many people here are probably paying 70+% of their income on housing, which puts them far above being severely burdened. And so what I wanted to say is, yes, some people would respond and say, but many of these folks are eligible for housing, other federal and state assistance programs. Most estimates show, though, that only 25% of households or families who are eligible for these types of benefits actually receive them. So less than a quarter. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. And I do encourage you to submit written
Great.
testimony to
I
the
will.
email.
I have plenty
Yes.
more to say. So thanks for having me.
Any questions?
I can ask a
Sure.
question. On your last point, what are some of the reasons that only not more than 25% of people who are eligible for this kind of assistance actually receive it?
Most federal and state assistance programs, there is a backlog of people who are actually requesting assistance. Two, there just aren't enough resources being put into state and federal programs. So there's just not enough money, not enough resources there for the number of people who need them. And we're talking, nationally, I could give you numbers, but it doesn't really matter when we're at the local level, right? So most people will go on waiting lists to get this kind of assistance and be on them for 10, 15, 20 years. So there's a lot of different reasons, not to mention that many people can't sort out bureaucracy and the kind of hurdles to do that for cultural reasons, language barriers, the fact working multiple jobs and kids and whatnot to deal with those kind of challenges. So there's lots of factors, but those are just a few.
Thank you, Peter. Other questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Didis, and then Andrew Staropoulos.
Can everybody hear me? My name is Kathy Didis, and my husband Bob and I own rentals. I know I should have asked for a weapons check at the door, but anyway, we are landlords, and we have been for many, many years here in Kingston. And we actually have a good rapport with all our tenants. We probably haven't done eviction in over 10 years. But anyway, what I would like to see happen is a practical solution that's fair for everyone involved. And I do think that not all landlords are greedy. Many landlords are small business owners. And maybe for them, their rent is their salary. They don't have a pension from the city of Kingston, from the state of New York, from IBM. They have to build a pension from their salary, and they have to pay their medical benefits from that as well. And right now, life is very expensive for all of us. We just put in a $7,000 septic system for a cottage with 2 renters. Now, I wonder if they had to pay for that themselves, how long would it take them to save $7,000? Some tenants are temporary. They do go on to buy a house, but many tenants won't get to that point. And I sometimes feel that people don't recognize the contribution that landlords make. I mean, there are a lot of people that need rentals. And like I said, we have a good relationship with all of our tenants. And also, sometimes I feel things that happen here are just not practical. We have a unit, 96 Clinton Avenue. It's at the corner of Clinton and Franklin, and there's 6 units in there. I think it was the first house we ever bought. But anyway, they wanted to improve the sidewalk. We had a beautiful fence all around that house. I think it was secure for the tenants. It was safety. Well, that fence has been ripped up, about 90% of it. If you ever want to see life being not practical, take a ride on Franklin Street, Franklin Avenue. Now, the house has been significantly devalued. And I don't know if those tenants will get the opportunity to have a rent reduction. But, you know, here we are. And I also feel that, you know, there should be some more practicality. I understand the tenant is the one who has to initiate the reduction from what I read so far, and I probably don't have all the facts. I don't find that very practical. But anyway, my understanding, that's what the rule is. Is there anyone here who can tell me that? Is that true? Okay. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up. And what I really think from my reading is we have a New York City program coming up to Kingston, New York. If that's what people want, okay. I personally don't want to be like New York City.
Thank you,
But
Kathy.
anyway, thank you for letting me speak tonight.
I encourage you to reach out
Oh.
to our colleagues at the Division of Homes and Community Renewal to help navigate.
You know, I have to be honest here. I wear hearing aids and I can't hear a word you're saying. So if you want a question, someone is going to have to interpret and come up and tell me what the question is.
Call these guys who work at the Division of Homes and Community Renewal. They manage the process. Michael.
Hi.
I'm going to go down to you.
Okay. So my question is, how many units on how many properties do you own?
Okay.
You can speak into this.
The question was, how many units and how many properties do we own, right? Okay. At one time, we owned 51 units spread among 6 or 7 properties. Now, my husband is here and he can help me because he has a better handle. He manages all that jazz. Today,
I do have just a follow-up question to that, though. Thank you. And how many are covered under the Rent Guidelines Board? How many are covered under the purview of this board? Thank you.
I would like to repeat the answer. Oh, what did Bob tell you?
He said 2 buildings. 2 buildings are covered under this board.
Oh, under the program. Right. There are 2 buildings covered under this program. Now, my understanding, you have to have 6 units because we have some buildings that only have 4 units.
Yes, thank you, Kathy.
I think the number of units we have is about 10 or 12,
Are there other questions for
but
Kathy?
they're not all covered by the program.
Thank you, Kathy. Andrew Staropoulos. And then Haley Carmel after that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm a small landlord. I have 1 building that falls. Okay, try it again. Good evening, everybody. I am a small landlord. One of my buildings falls under the Tenant Protection Act. I have 6 units in that building. And my wife and I are small landlords. We do this part-time. As Kathy said, we have a good relationship with our tenants. Thank you. We have a very good relationship with our tenants. Very hands-on. Whatever I can do, I do. The cleaning, the painting, the maintenance, as far as, you know, the cleaning and painting go. We've had tenants that have been out of work and they've let me know, and I've dialed their rent back. I'm self-policing. I have a lot of empathy. My family has empathy. I'm just asking for this rent control board to be reasonable, because the tax bill comes every year and it's painful, and we have insurance costs. it's very painful in a 6-unit building. Also, I don't have to tell anybody here, the Central Hudson, the utility bills are very high, water bills are high. So I'm just asking for you to be reasonable. I don't really like how this is rolled out. I think the main offenders are these large complexes run by LLCs. I don't think it relates to people like my wife and I. We have a 6-unit building, a 3-unit building, and a 2-unit building. Another example, I won't take up too much more time, but we had a tenant that came out of the hospital when we first bought this building. And I just finished renovating a unit and it was ready for rent. I offered her the apartment downstairs, which is a 1-bedroom. She's under RUPCO. At that point, she wasn't willing to move. She didn't want to move and that was fine, but she's in a very large 2-bedroom and we didn't want to displace her during the COVID. So now eventually she's in the RUPCO lottery. She's going to move on, but I'm going to be locked into a very low rent when I chose not to displace her. Again, in the same building, we have a retired gentleman. He's close to 80 years old and he's paying extremely low rent. When you talk 625, his rent's lower than that for a nice studio apartment where I pay the utilities. Again, I'm not going to displace this gentleman, but I don't think we're the problem. I'm just asking you guys to be reasonable when you're setting. A negative increase would be disastrous to small landlords. And, I'm just hoping for the best. Thank you. And any questions?
Thank you, Andrew. Any other questions?
I'd love to field questions from a landlord's perspective.
This is not from the landlord's perspective, I'm sorry, but I was wondering, with all of these things, do you still manage to turn a profit on your properties?
Currently, I'm trying to fix up the property. My goal was to buy the property and fix it up. And now I can't even refinance it. So if I were to improve the property and refinance it, I'm kind of stuck because I bought it in 2019 at a high level. So this is very difficult. And now with the rents being frozen, figured eventually when the tenant moves on, I could go closer to market rent. And we're not talking $2,000 or $3,000. We're talking $1,200 maybe for a 2-bedroom to help pay the cost, something reasonable, not not what I'm hearing being advertised, But no, I didn't mean from a landlord's perspective. I meant, I'd love to, as a landlord, answer your questions. It's a lot of one-sidedness. So I'd like to entertain as many questions as I can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
But you only have one building that falls under
Yes.
this, yeah.
Just the 1-6 family, yes.
And do you mind saying which building it is?
It's across from the post office in Kingston.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all a matter of record.
Yeah.
We take a lot of pride in the building. And like I said, when it comes to cost, everybody who's a homeowner knows when you have to call a licensed electrician or a plumber, if they show up, if they come to the house, how expensive how terrifying it is. And those calls come in all the time. So as a small landlord, I have to do everything else that I can. I have to clean out the apartments. I have to do the painting. I have to do the small repairs. A lot of calls in the middle of the night. I got a call at 10:30 a few weeks ago that a refrigerator wasn't working right. Okay, I thought that could have waited till the morning, but they got a refrigerator in a couple days. It was delivered, and that's the fastest I could get it there. A brand new refrigerator. Stuff like that happens all the time to landlords, and it's a real reality. So I'm left with, again, I've been doing this for nearly 20 years, and I'm almost 50. So what I could do when I was 30 is very different than what I can do now. So as far as cleaning and painting and all that work, I've slowed down, and I'm afraid that this legislation is really going to hurt people like me.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
And I do want to encourage you to identify the provisions of the law that can have room for making appeals for particular situations.
Like waivers and stuff. Yeah. That's what
again. Talk to the folks from the state who are experts in helping.
It seemed that was one of the saving graces. One of the things that hurt the most was just when we listened into the sessions that okay, when we do finally, when people move out and we improve the building, that we can't go to more reasonable rents because all the rents are extremely low. And it's hard because Now, because interest rates went up, I can't refinance as I improve the property, so I'm stuck with a high rate. So stuff like that.
Thank you. Haley Carmel and then Daniel Carmel.
Okay, thank you.
Is it this mic or this mic? This one? Okay. Hi, my name is Haley Carmel. I'll keep my testimony brief. I live here in Kingston, and in addition to my own very tedious and exhausting search for affordable housing when I first moved here, I am here today to advocate for the community at large as well. I'm a local caseworker. I work with displaced youth and youth experiencing homelessness and families experiencing homelessness, which is a heartbreakingly large population in Kingston. What's happening in Kingston, I mean, in regards to housing is nothing short of a human rights crisis. I mean, people are really, really hurting. They're really suffering. More than it's hard to bear witness to, truly. I mean, it's so bad. So again, I urge the board to see how much relief you can bring to the community by granting this reduction. The safety and livelihood of so many kids and families depend on the committee to do the right thing and seeing this rent reduction through. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Is there any questions?
Thank you, Haley. Any questions?
Thank you, Haley. Do you have a sense of how whether homelessness in Kingston has increased, over the past few years since the pandemic? And
Yeah, it's gone up, specifically with youth in Kingston School District. It's gone up. I mean, I don't have exact numbers, so I don't feel comfortable putting any forward, but it's a very noticeable amount, to the point where my role was actually created as a response to the housing crisis, as a response to the ongoing homelessness crisis. People are, again, it's a significant number. It's very obvious. If there was a chart, it would be a big spike. Like it's bad. So if that gives you a general sense, but again, I don't have those numbers in front of me.
When you do have those numbers, I would certainly encourage you to provide that to the committee.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that as soon as possible. I appreciate that. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, I don't think so. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Carmel and then Daniel Atuna.
My name is Daniel Carmel, Carmel, and yes, we are related. I'm up here today not as a tenant, but as an educator, which puts me in position to also see how particularly devastating the issue of unaffordable housing and the homelessness that directly follows it impacts kids in this community. I'm up here to represent to my best ability the experiences of youth as I see it, as my experience as a teacher. Unaffordable housing, and as I said, the homelessness that directly follows it. It's devastating for anyone that experiences it, but particularly kids and teenagers. I can't do my job as an educator if I come into school and kids are concerned with their most basic needs. The kids that do have housing are often living in shoddy housing in conditions I would barely consider humane. And the kids that are lucky enough to have, school provided laptops, it is not uncommon for kids to not have working or functioning outlets to charge those laptops. So, it's not, it's a problem that the adults are responsible for, but everyone feels when a parent is worrying about rent and whether they can afford it, that kid comes to school with that, and I experience it directly in the classroom. So I'll keep it brief. I want to reserve space for the tenants that are experiencing this travesty, but I would encourage this body to move to reduce rent wherever possible and retroactively and reimburse people because people are hurting. Winter is coming. It's a travesty. So I thank you for your time. The last thing I'd say, I hear a lot about small business owners, small landowners. That's great. It really doesn't change things in my perspective. Oftentimes, small business owners are just as pernicious. Small landlords are just as damaging, especially because they only have those very few tenants to depend on and to extract the most possible profit from. So I respect that everyone has to make a living, but you chose yours. Thank this body for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Daniel Atona, and then Joel Kaminsky.
Hello. My name is Daniel Atona, A-T-O-N-N-A. Name is also Daniel, but we are not related. Hi, everyone. I'm the political coordinator at For the Many. I work here in the city of Kingston at 13 Grand Street. And I want to thank the brave tenants who came here tonight and the Rent Guidelines Board for welcoming us. I've spent a lot of time in Kingston canvassing for ETPA. I've talked to tenants dealing with noisy construction projects in their buildings, broken faucets, leaky roofs, smashed windows, black mold, malfunctioning outlets, mysterious fees, threatening letters from landlords, and illegal evictions. ETPA is not a radical law. It was passed by the state in 1974. Many municipalities across the state have opted in, including the cities of Glen Cove, Long Beach, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, White Plains, and Yonkers. If I tried to read all the municipalities that have opted in, it would take all my time. There's a proud history of rent control here, but Kingston has a chance to go even further, and it should. According to Point to Homes, a website used by real estate developers, the average apartment rent in Kingston in August 2022 was $1,437. This was almost 12% increase from last year. Back in 2020, the average rent was $1,200. According to apartments.com, there are only 91 available apartments in Kingston. So telling people to just move is not an acceptable answer. Tenants are getting squeezed while landlords are making more and more money. A study from JP Morgan Chase, which is not a leftist institution, says that the median landlord has over $22,000 in their checking account. That's the median landlord. And that's a hell of a lot more than most tenants have. For the Many and our base of working class people here in Kingston are asking the Rent Guidelines Board to pass as long a look back window as possible and reduce rents. And I'm speaking now to the tenants in ETPA buildings. You are currently safe from eviction and rent increases. If you are being threatened, contact a lawyer. You need to use this opportunity right now to organize. Reach out to For the Many. We can help you form tenants unions. When you wield your power collectively, there is no landlord who can stop you. Be happy to take questions. An audience. Yeah.
Questions from the board?
I'd be happy to take your question afterwards if it's not allowed right now.
We'll take it afterwards. If you want.
Yeah,
Well, he won't be here to answer.
I'll be here. I'm going to be here all night. Yeah. I'm camping out till the next hearing.
It's not here.
Yeah, you know we're moving to the library. Any questions? Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thanks so much.
Joel Kaminsky, and then Rich Lanzarone. Joel. Oh, there you go.
Hello, my name is Joel Kaminsky, Kaminski. I've been a landlord since 1984 here in Kingston. And when we bought the one property that's affected by this law back in 1985, it was owned by a slumlord and it did not have a working heating system. He would kick out all the tenants when the weather got cold, and then he would re-rent in the spring. So I've been working on this building with my wife for over 30 years. We do not rent any apartment that we wouldn't live in ourselves. All of our rents are below market value because we're friends with our tenants, and so we don't gouge like some of these landlords do. I feel like this law is kind of a broad brush, which it includes everybody and unfairly affects the smaller landlord. If there's a problem with a leaky faucet or something, the tenant will call, and I'm the one who fixes it. I don't know what else to say. I realize that everyone wants lower rents. I mean, that's great. I mean, everyone wants lower food prices, lower gas prices as well. I mean, but it's got to come from somewhere. And we have, the taxes are going up, the utility bills are going up, insurance is going up, and I don't know what to say. It's not really fair. And since most of our rents are below market value, since the rents are below market value, I feel like we're being penalized by being a good guy, by keeping the rents low for our tenants. I can understand that, there's certain bad apples that have raised the rents like crazy. Part of the problem is that there are not enough apartments in Kingston, and there's been a big influx from Brooklyn and other places. And it's a bad problem, but I don't know how I can fix that, because I only have a certain number of apartments that are rented, and they're all full. So I guess that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joel. Any questions? Thank you, Joel. Rich, and then Nora Jean Fitzgerald will be next.
Good evening, board. My name is Richard Lanzarone, and I'm the executive director. Sorry. Hi, good evening, board. My name is Rich Lanzarone, and I'm the executive director of the Hudson Valley Property Owners Association. I represent the 69 property owners affected by ETPA in Kingston. 75% of the property owners I represent are small landlords like the ones you heard here tonight, including myself. You will decide whether this will be a political process or a data-driven process. Your job is not to provide affordable housing. Your job is to keep rents aligned with changes in cost. If someone can stand up here tonight and say the costs of owning, operating, heating, powering, maintaining, insuring, and financing rental properties in Kingston has stayed the same or gone down, those statements are not credible. Actually, costs have risen dramatically. Central Hudson just announced 5 days ago that electricity costs have jumped 400%. Heating fuel has risen 100%. Building materials needed to maintain buildings have risen 75%. Labor costs in Ulster County. And by the way, contrary to what we heard tonight, this is from Department of Labor website today. Labor costs in Ulster County, that's for painting, cleaning, maintaining, landscaping, snow removal, electricians, plumbers, etc., have risen from 2019 to 2021, 14%, and that doesn't include 2022, and projecting into 2022, labor costs will have increased 18 to 20%. Financing costs have increased 130%, from 3% to 7%. School taxes, water and sewer fees have risen. Now we have the added cost of compliance. I just bought a 900-page manual that has the rules for landlords to comply with ETPA. Imagine foisting that on small landlords. If anyone can stand up here tonight and say the cost of owning, operating, heating, powering, maintaining, insuring, and financing rental properties in Kingston has stayed the same or gone down, those statements are not credible. Your job is not to provide affordable housing. Your job is to keep rents aligned with changes in cost. Your job is, however, to ensure that housing stock remains financially viable. Housing providers are not responsible to subsidize renters and take on the responsibility of government and its lack of funding for rent subsidies. I lived in New York City in the 70s and saw what ETPA did to the city. Tens of thousands of tenants filed fair market rent appeals. Hundreds of thousands of housing units were destroyed as owners went bankrupt and had to walk away. Heat and electricity was turned off. Squatters moved in and set fires to keep warm. Buildings burned. The scavengers moved in and stripped the copper pipes and wires. Urban blight was the product of ETPA. It took 30 years for the city to recover. The same can happen here. It's happening again in New York City. According to DHCR, a study they just published, since 2019, HTPSA was enacted. 60,000 apartments have vanished from the city because HTPSA, which we're under, makes reinvesting in apartments impossible. The same will definitely happen here. Remember, these buildings are very old and in desperate need of a very high level of reinvestment and maintenance. Your job is also to ensure that the housing stock remains financially viable. Our guests from DHCR recognize the impact and the statistic, they'll explain this to you, that immediately 100% of these buildings are immediately considered highly regulated, and what that means for the economic viability of these buildings. Remember, your job is to ensure that the housing stock remains financially viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. I have one question. I'm curious how you define small landlord.
Well, I consider myself a small landlord. I have 3 buildings in Kingston, a 2-family, a 4-family, and a 6-family. I consider myself a small landlord.
I have a question. So you said you represent like 69 properties that are affected?
69 property owners in the city of Kingston. That's every single property that I've identified as affected by ETPA.
And do you know since like 2019, by how much rents have increased in the properties, those properties that you represent?
I don't know, actually. I just know my own personal experience. I mean, in my last round of rent increases, my increases were 0%, 2%, 4.5%, maybe one was at 5%. I could just talk for myself.
I have a question. For the association, what is the annual turnover percentage of covered units? And if you don't know the answer to that.
I'm sorry, I don't know that.
Personally, for the one building that you have, what is the annual turnover rate?
It's very low.
Thank you.
I consider myself a good landlord, like you've heard some others. I do most of the work myself. My tenants have my cell phone number. They text me and they usually get a response within a half an hour.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
And I would appreciate it if you would send that testimony by email also so that I can read the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will provide more data. I know you're having another public hearing. I'll provide more data on what actual cost increases. Thank you.
Thank you. Nora Jane Fitzgerald, and then Michael McKee. Nora Jane Fitzgerald. Great, moving on to Michael McKee. And then after Michael, Jen Benson.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Michael McKee. I represent the Tenants Political Action Committee. I'm also a member of I represent the Tenants Political Action Committee. I also am a member of the statewide Housing Justice for All campaign. I'm not going to read my statement, obviously, but I urge you to read it later. What I do want to talk about is the kind of behavior we've been not hearing about tonight, because the kind of behavior that we've known is happening in Kingston and has been happening in Kingston for several years, egregious, illegal behavior by landlords, you won't hear that. They won't be here to testify. I want to point two things out to you before, which is that, number one, inflation affects everyone. It affects landlords and it affects tenants. And I ask you to consider who is better equipped to survive the impact of inflation, landlords or tenants. And I also want to remind you that there are many benefits to ownership of real property, quite independent of the rent roll. For one thing, you own an asset, which even though our tax code pretends that it depreciates over time, in fact, actually grows more valuable year by year. I was downstairs earlier this evening for a news conference sponsored by For the Many, heard a series of horror stories of landlords demanding, when rents were frozen, meaning after July 29th, when the Common Council voted to declare an emergency and the mayor signed it into law, and rents were frozen and it was illegal for landlords to raise rents, landlords hitting tenants with written demands for 18%, 30%, 40%, and telling them that if they didn't agree to this, they would be evicted. Also illegal under ETPA, because under ETPA, you can't just arbitrarily evict a tenant, you have to have what's called a just cause or a good cause. I'm here to urge you to enact a significant rent rollback. This is a one-time occurrence, and it is a necessary occurrence to correct for what's been going on in this city for the last several years. I have never taken the position in the 50 years that I have been doing this, 52 years I've been doing this work, that there should never ever be a rent increase. Obviously, once in a while, a rent increase is necessary. But this is a time when you, as the board, need to grapple with the reality of what is happening in the rental market in the city of Kingston and what has been happening for at least the last 3 years, and from what I've been able to determine, longer than that. So I think a rent rollback is very much in order. This would not be something you would be doing every single year, obviously. And next year you will be given some income and expense data by the Office of Rent Administration, which will help you at that point decide what would be an appropriate rent adjustment, if any. Let me talk about the fair market rent appeal, because this is, I think, the most confusing part of your responsibility and something that is very poorly understood. The first thing you should understand that this is a very rare occurrence. It only happens outside of the city of New York. It only happens when a municipality first opts into the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. So for most municipalities, this happened back in 1974. And then it happened in 1981 in the village of Hempstead in Nassau County, because it wasn't until 1981 that Hempstead opted into ETPA. It happened again in 2006 when the city of Rye in Westchester County opted into ETPA. And it happened again in 2018 when the village of Ossining in Westchester County opted into ETPA. And now it's happening here. So it won't happen again until the next municipality, whether that be Ithaca or Beacon or Poughkeepsie or wherever, opts into ETPA. So it's a one-time occurrence and you need to get it right. I would strongly urge you, do not limit the look-back period to an unreasonable frame of time. You need to figure out, and you can do this by looking at newspaper articles, by testimony, and by the data have to be out there. You need to look and see, when did landlords start jacking up rents in Kingston? And from what I've been able to determine, this happened before 2019 when the city of Kingston first began talking about opting into ETPA, but it certainly started happening 3 years ago.
Thank you.
When the city council, common council opted in.
I have a question for Mr. McKee.
Yeah.
What are some of the concerns and effects of a shorter fair market rent appeal window?
The basic point is that if you limit the look back period to 1 year, anyone who got a rent increase before that would not be able to file a fair market rent appeal. If you limited it to 2 years, anyone who got a rent increase 3 years ago would be out of luck. This is what happened in the village of Ossining when the Westchester County Board, at the behest of the agency, limited the look back period to 6 months. So in fairness, you need to allow all tenants in all of these buildings the opportunity to file a fair market rent appeal, and some might choose not to do it. If I were Catherine's tenant or Mr. Kaplan's tenant, I probably wouldn't file a fair market rent appeal because it sounds like they were not gouging. But we know there were many, many landlords in Kingston who were rent gouging and have been rent gouging. They were not raising rents based on operating costs. They were profiteering. You can't tell me that an 18%, 30%, 40% rent increase is necessary for any landlord. Just, it's not real. If I could just make one more point, I want to point out to you that the young woman who testified very early, Chanel Marshall from 58 Fair Street, that is an ETPA building. That is a building where rents are frozen and where arbitrary and unjust evictions are not allowed any longer. She just told me that the judge ordered her eviction as of November 18th because the judge didn't want to hear that the building was now rent regulated. So somehow, someone in the city, someone in the city of Kingston, legal services, common council, the mayor's office needs to get those tenants some help because they're going to be evicted on November 18th because the judge didn't know that ETPA was in effect and that she had protections and she could not get a lawyer. And I want to remind you that legal services of Hudson Valley has 2 lawyers for the entire county of Ulster. This is a big problem.
I have actually some more follow-up questions. So just to be clear, the fair market rent appeal is a completely voluntary operation that tenants can take?
It's an option that a tenant should have.
And I just forgot my follow-up to that follow-up question. So
That's all right. I forget all the time. What do you get to my age and you'll really forget?
I wanted to ask you if you, because you have been involved in housing organizing for a long time, have you seen how does opting into ETPA affect the broader housing market in other municipalities that have done this? We heard one,
Mhm.
you know, story about what that looked like in New York. So I wanted to hear from you, you know, what's your perspective on that question?
It's a very good question. Actually, what you do here, even though technically it will only affect a limited number of apartments, it will have an impact on the overall rental market. So if you keep rents low over the next several years, and your job is not to keep rents consistent with operating costs, your job is to keep rents affordable, not just for the tenants living in these apartments now, but for future tenants who need an affordable place to live 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road. So if you keep rents affordable and modest over the next few years, this will have an impact on the entire market. Obviously, one of the legislative reforms we're hoping eventually to be able to enact would be to lower the 6 or more threshold to a lower number so that more buildings in upstate. This would reflect the realities of the upstate rental market.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I do have one more. I remembered it.
You remembered.
Are there any specific to Kingston elements that HCR should keep in mind when creating the fair market rent appeal?
Well, it's not their job, it's your job to, it is your job entirely to vote for and adopt a fair market rent guideline. The statute assigns this responsibility to you and you alone. Well, I guess I should say the 8 members of this board, since we seem to be missing a 9th member. But we don't? Hi. So, but it is your job, not the agency's job, to establish a fair market guideline.
Thank you, Mr. McKee.
And you should, I would urge you to try to use some common sense and to the extent that you can, base the fair market guideline on what would have been a reasonable rent, you know, if someone were not rent gouging. And that's, you know, it's almost common sense that you're going to have to do a number and you're going to have to do a look back period. This is complicated and it's going to take some discussion among the boards. I have to tell you, when I was here on September 21st, I found the questions that the board members asked to be very refreshing and interesting, because most of the rent guidelines boards, to be quite blunt, are kind of jaded. You know, they've been doing this for years and years and years. This is a new experience for you guys. And it was very interesting to hear some of the questions that you were asking. But you're going to need to grapple with this and come to some kind of decision that 5 or more of you can feel comfortable with. And you don't want to just pull things out of the air, pull numbers out of the air. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Jen Benson and then Patty Perez.
Hello, my name is Jen Benson. I live and work in Kingston. I'm a tenant. I do not live in an EPA affected building, but I have spent the last 10 months, spending a lot of time knocking on doors in the city of Kingston, along with other volunteers, for Sarah Hanna, who's running for New York State Assembly. And within those conversations at doors, what emerged as the most predominant theme, no matter what neighborhood we were canvassing in, is that people in this community are being affected by incredibly high rents. And they're having to make decisions about whether or not they pay their rent or their electricity bill, or they buy the groceries that their families need, or the school supplies that their kids need. And these are not decisions that they're taking lightly. And they're wondering what else they can do and why it's happening. And it goes so far as to, I was speaking to a family, I live in Midtown, and this man and his partner both got second jobs because their rent was raised so much. And that isn't just causing them to work a second jobs. That takes time away from their kids. And that also causes them to incur the additional burden of not only securing childcare, but also paying for it. And on top of it, that work is taking them out of their home that they're having to seek additional work to pay for. And in addition to that, they were concerned about yet another rent increase, which if their rent increased anymore, they weren't going to be able to afford to live in Kingston, where their jobs were and where their families were and where their network of friends are and their support system. And we're even looking to move outside of Ulster County because the lack of affordable housing, not only within our city, but also within our county, displacing them fully. And that was the resounding issue that people are facing. And I've been in the Hudson Valley for 7 years, and I've been in Kingston for over 3, and watching people that I know who are my age, but are also older friends, watching people try to look for housing in this community is incredibly difficult. I'm a young professional. I've been in the nonprofit sector for 7 years, and I can't afford an apartment on my own. I have a variety of roommates. I've had more roommates than I can count in the last 3 years because people can't even afford apartment shares at this point. And that doesn't seem to be getting any better. And that's why we need a substantial look back period, but we also need a negative rent increase, because the way that things are going, the working people of this community can't afford to stay working in this community. And the working class are the foundation of Kingston and of communities across the county.
Thank you, Jen. Patty. And after Patty, Eli King.
P-E-R, easy. P as in Peter, E-R, easy.
And just, sorry, before you begin, it would be great if we could silence our phones. And if you would like to speak but have not signed up yet, please do put your name on the list by the door. And do silence your phones.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Chair Kipley Ogman and the City of Kingston Rent Guidelines Board. Thank you for your invitation to participate in this public hearing. My name is Patty Perez. I am one of the housing attorneys, one of the gentlemen referred to for legal services of the Hudson Valley for Ulster County. Legal Services of the Hudson Valley is the sole provider in the Hudson Valley of free, comprehensive legal services in civil matters for individuals and families who cannot afford an attorney when their basic human needs are at stake. This includes urgent legal needs, such as eviction prevention. LSHV has represented tenants facing eviction in Kingston City Court for decades. Through our offices in Westchester and Rockland counties, we have represented thousands of tenants living in apartments governed by Emergency Tenant Protection Act, ETPA.
We welcome the opportunity to share our knowledge of applicable law and procedure. Tenants in Kingston and throughout the Hudson Valley have been in the housing crisis for years. The ETPA has the potential to improve housing stability for covered tenants. How the ETPA affects a household or community depends on application and enforcement of its provisions. The decisions the Rent Guidelines Board makes after these hearings will affect ETPA in Kingston for generations. ETPA 1 requires a landlord to offer a tenant a lease renewal on the same terms and conditions and with the same services absent good cause, and 2, limits rent changes. Tenants throughout our service area regularly face eviction after termination of month-to-month tenancies or non-renewals of written leases, or in non-payment proceedings when the rent is increased to unaffordable levels. When we represent tenants in apartments subject to ETPA, we have many more legal tools to prevent eviction. However, ETPA does not guarantee affordable housing. And if the rent is unaffordable, the family's housing is unstable. The board is essentially deciding how much rent ETPA tenants will pay next month, which determines how much they will pay in the future. First, the board is deciding what percentage rent change can be applied to rents people are paying today. Second, the board is deciding what guidelines to give to DHCR to determine whether the actual rents people are paying today are too high. In future years, the board will determine maximum percentage rent changes to the rents that are set based upon the decisions made after these hearings. In other words, in future years, a tenant will only be able to challenge the rent if the landlord increases it beyond the percentage allowed by the board, or if the landlord reduces services. The legality of the rent charged to an ETPA tenant becomes a multiplication problem. The initial legal rent times maximum percentage increases allowed by the board. LSHV has seen our clients struggle to afford their rents and struggle to find alternative housing when faced with the lease non-renewal. The pandemic has driven up already high rents and reduced availability. The Ulster County 2020 Housing Survey outlined the many ways the influx of New York City residents to the county have impacted local housing. Vacancy rates are decreasing, home prices and rents are increasing, and over half of renters are cost burdened. In a typical year, hundreds of eviction cases are filed in Kingston City Court. The majority are for non-payment of rent, meaning tenants have been notified they have the 14 days to pay the rent or be evicted. Some tenants have seen rent increases of $200 to $400 a month in order to stay where they are. Due to housing stock shortages and the increased demand for housing, there literally is not enough alternative housing for these tenants to move to. Our holdover clients are in dire straits, pressured to leave their homes because their landlord is selling the property, but having absolutely nowhere to go. ETPA relies on public participation. Landlords are required to register initial rents and services and then file annual registration of rents, which do not exceed the local guidelines board maximum increases. If the rent is not registered, services are not provided, or the actual rent charged exceeds the maximum allowable increase, the remedy is for the tenant to file a complaint with DHCR. In our Westchester County offices, we have seen buildings with years of missing registrations, questionable claims of renovations or improvements, and courses of conduct intended to get ETPA tenants to move and therefore lose ETPA's protections.
Thank you, Patty. Sorry, we're out of time.
Oh, sorry.
I have one question before I pass it on to colleagues. Over what period of time have you seen significant rent increases? When would you say that the sort of escalation of
Right,
rents
we
that's
talked
happened?
about this a little bit today amongst ourselves. And it, it's something that started pre-COVID, so 2017.
Yes. How many eviction cases has Legal Services of the Hudson Valley represented since the expiration of the eviction moratorium?
I don't have that number.
Okay. So would you know how many cases that you've had to turn away due to overcapacity?
Again, I don't have that number, but we do have more cases than we can handle. That's what I
Could
can
you give
answer.
an estimated
We do have
percentage?
more cases than we can handle.
Can you give an estimated
Oh, an
percentage?
estimate, I can, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you.
Do you have a sense of how much the rate of eviction proceedings in Kingston has changed over recent years?
How much what, I'm sorry?
How much change have you seen in eviction proceedings, like the number of them in Kingston City Courts?
I think that was, I think I actually referred to that. 1 second, let me just see. No, I don't have that, but it's something that I could probably follow up with you about.
And I do encourage you to send your written testimony to the email address that will reach the board.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to encourage you to any effect that your organization can come up with specific data regarding changes or rates of eviction and whatnot, to submit that to the board. Thank you.
Eli King and then Maggie Smith.
My name is Eli King. Y'all hear me? All right. I'm from the Mid-Hudson Valley chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. The Hudson Valley has a housing crisis. Rent was not affordable for a large section of working people before COVID, and we all know it's gotten worse. In Kingston, due to the idiosyncrasies of the law, you all have the opportunity to help effective tenants who happen to live in buildings built in 1974 or earlier. So this isn't even, we're not even talking about all tenants here. This is still very good. We have landlords coming up here talking about how this is going to sink them. I think that y'all have been asking how many of their buildings are covered by ETPA. It's not all of them. It's not even most of them. Of course, they are going to come up here and talk about how it is going to be the end of the world if they face the prospect at the loss of any profit. Anyone who will stand up here and with a straight face put human beings' access to housing on the same level as a property owner seeing a return on their investment is either a liar or a sociopath. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli. Maggie Smith, and then Lewis, and I can't read your last name. Starts with a B. Maggie Smith, are you here? Lewis, last name I think starts with a B. Thank you.
Berg, B-U-R-G-H. Hi, everyone. My name is Louis Berg. I'm a tenant and I live in Kingston in Ward 5. I've lived here for many years. The building I live in is not covered by ETPA and is not subject to the Rent Guidelines Board, but I have family, friends, and neighbors who do live in such buildings. In the years I've lived here, I've seen Kingston rents increase dramatically. For many of us, it has become almost impossible to live and work in Kingston. The Rent Guidelines Board has a huge historic opportunity to right the wrong of high predatory rents and use a long look-back period to enact a negative rent increase and retroactively reduce rents for our friends, neighbors, and family members who are being exploited. Landlords do not have the right to be free from regulation. For all the landlords who are complaining that they already charge below market rents and are always fair and generous to their tenants, if that's true, then these rules will not affect you. These are not New York City laws. These are laws for everyone to protect the people we care about. If being a landlord is a business, then when people choose to become landlords, they assume risks. One of those risks is that people will have protection from their local government and the landlords will not be able to raise rent whenever they want without oversight. Housing is a human right, and people who live here have a right to remain here. Take this opportunity to use a long look-back period to enact a negative rent increase for renters who fall under the Guidelines Board. I am asking for this because I want my neighbors, friends, and family to be able to stay and enjoy Kingston, a more equitable and fair Kingston for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Stephen Pampanella, and then Rosalia Riga.
Sure. Stephen Pampanella, last name Pampinella. Hello. Good evening. I'm here calling on the Rent Guidelines Board to lower rents for Kingston residents and activate that 2-year look back. It's important to ensure that this city is affordable for working and middle-class people. I lived in Kingston from 2015 to 2018 in a 1-bedroom basement apartment on the corner of Wall Street and Linderman Avenue. I currently live in New Paltz, where I work as a professor. At the time, I paid $750 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. Certainly wasn't glamorous, but it was a fine place to live on my full-time salary, and it enabled me to visit local restaurants, support the local economy. I'm currently looking to move again, but I will not be moving to Kingston. The rental prices here make it impossible for me to rent an apartment here. To be clear, I make a good salary. I cannot imagine what it's like for working class people to try to rent an apartment and find housing here. As costs have risen, not just housing, but everything else from fuel to all other costs that have been mentioned tonight, it makes it simply impossible to rent here and pay the rest of our bills. So instead of looking in Kingston, I'm going to look elsewhere. I'm going to look in other towns, probably not even in Ulster County because the crisis in housing is county-wide. And this is incredibly frustrating because I have a lot to give back to this community. I have friends here, I have colleagues here in local government, and there's just no way that I could still afford here. Not when I have other colleagues who make the same salary as me, who are paying exorbitant rents upward of about $1,600. If you look on Zillow, for example, it'll tell you that about the 33% income threshold should be something like $1,400, right? Well, we're way above that already. the alternative here is to simply leave Kingston and abandon the city. As the city is trying to bounce back from COVID, from the economic crisis more broadly that we've been going through, losing people who are fortunate enough to have good salaries like me is going to hurt the local economy. You will not have businesses that are patronized by people who can spend money on those. What effectively will happen is Kingston will decline. It will continue to go downhill, and all that will be left are very wealthy people and the landlords making money off of all the renters. So again, I encourage the Rent Guidelines Board to reduce rents and enact that 2-year look back period. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Rosalia. And Teresa Green afterwards.
Hi, I'm Priscilla. I'm her interpreter. Okay. Dice que lo que usted me diga, yo le interpreto y me habla como oraciones. Okay, su nombre me puede.
Mi nombre es Rosalía Arriaga.
Rosalía Arriaga. So Rosalia. Rosalía is her first name, and Arriaga is ARRIAGA.
Yo tengo que me mandó el landlord una carta.
The landlord sent me a paper through mail. The landlord sent me a letter through mail
Que le tengo que desocupar el apartamento para diciembre primero.
that I have to leave my apartment by the 1st of December.
Y el apartamento no está en buen estado y no tengo los medios para cambiarme.
And the apartment isn't in a good state, and I don't have enough money to leave.
Tengo dos hijas pequeñas.
I have 2 small daughters.
Tengo 2 trabajos y aún así no me da.
I have 2 jobs and I still don't have enough.
Tengo que comprar comida y todas lo necesario para la casa.
I have to buy food and everything necessary we need at home.
Mi casa está, me da vergüenza decirlo, pero lo tengo que decir.
And I'm embarrassed to say what I'm about to say about my house.
Hay muchas cucarachas.
There's a lot of roaches.
El dueño no fumiga.
The landlord hasn't fumigated.
Él vive en Poughkeepsie, yo le llamo y él no me contesta.
He lives in Poughkeepsie. I call him and he doesn't answer.
Dice que le tengo que desocupar y que no, que ya no me da más tiempo.
And he's telling me that I have to leave and I don't have much time.
Y no sé qué hacer. No
And
tengo
I don't know what to
tiempo.
do. I don't have enough money.
No sé, eso es todo.
I don't know. That's all. Okay.
I have a,
Thank you so much for coming.
Gracias.
Junior.
do you know if the building you live in is covered by ETPA?
¿Usted sabe si el edificio que usted vive está bajo ese programa EDPA?
No lo sé,
I don't know.
porque yo
Ah.
vivo en la 47 Elmendor.
I
Can you
live in
state your
47
address?
Elmendor.
El landlord, ¿cómo se llama?
I have the name of my landlord.
If you are covered under this, I would ask that you submit any of these communications infrequently that they are with your landlord to the board.
Si usted está bajo este programa, sí les digo que solicite toda esta cosa que estamos hablando con esta junta.
Pero en dónde yo puedo ir porque tengo que desocupar ya lo más pronto posible.
Where can I go? What can I do? Because I have to leave as soon as possible.
I can write down our email.
Le puedo escribir a usted nuestro correo electrónico.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I just checked and 47 Elmendorf is not on the list, but the city of Kingston does have good cause eviction, and I hope that you can find some relief with that.
Okay, 400, su dirección está en la lista para el programa, pero sí
Nothing
hay
at
ciertas
Elmendorf
cosas
is on the
para el
list.
alojamiento que tal vez la ciudad le pueda ayudar.
The Director of City Housing Initiatives, who has a title that is slightly different than that, is sitting right here. I would encourage you to pigeonhole him and see what support is available.
Okay. Ahí está, señora.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Gracias.
Thank you so much. Teresa Green and then Stephanie Sickler.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa Green. I live at 305 Hurley Avenue. I have been there for about 15 years. I'm here tonight regarding the rent increase. I am one of the tenants that has been affected by the high cost of the increase. So I'm going to put my business in the street right now so y'all can understand what is actually happening. All right. So if we're only going to deal with 2019, I just wrote some numbers down. Back in 2019, my rent was $1,215 and it increased to $1,325. And at that time, I was offered a 2-year lease. All right. It then increased to 13, and that increases 9%. And then it increased to from 1325 to 1378 in 2020, which is only a 4% increase. So I'm not sure whether all of the tenants where we live are getting the same percentage, but I'm just telling you my story, all right? And then 2021, well, here we are, we're at 2022, I'm sorry. The increase from 1378 to 1537, that's the base rent, all right? We have a trash cost that's in there, all right? So when we're talking about these rents, when we pay our rent, we pay all of the fee and everything together, and we consider that our rent. So we have a trash fee that was an increase, which is $25 now. They also added the $65 for the amenities, all right? Which they offered me this increase at $16.27, all right? With the increase of amenities. But we also pay water and sewer. So I'll give you a rounded amount. My water sewer comes out to about $55 to $60 a month. And that brings me to just dealing at 1682. This increase is an 11.6% increase in the base rent, all right? But with the amenities and everything included, basically it's an increase of $224. If we don't get some sort of rent stabilization, I am 62 years old. I will be 65 in 3 years, which will make me a senior citizen, and we don't even have enough senior housing. There's people in my building that are older than me that have been there a long time, and they're being pushed out because of these high rents. But if there's no rent stabilization, just look at what I'm looking at in the next 3 years. If I'm going to look at an increase of about $224 a month, that would be in 3 years an increase of about $772, which would bring my rent to $2,394.
Thank you, Teresa. Sorry, you're out of time, but I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What would you recommend this board do?
I'm recommended that the board finds a percentage that will, a percentage of increase that will allow people like me and all the other tenants who are dealing with these high increases, we'll have an idea of what to expect each year when it renews. We don't know now. I told you 9% and 4%, now we're 11.6%. We need to know where we stand with increases, and this needs to be stable. So if it's going to be 4%, 4%, 5%, it gives us an idea of where we're going forward. But with everything all willy-nilly like it is, we don't know what our future is going to look like. And most of us don't have savings. I am self-employed. I work from home. My business bottomed out because I'm in a beauty business, and the pandemic didn't allow me to be in contact. Some of the business is coming back, but still, it's a struggle. It's a real struggle, and I'm frightened for what our future looks like. My husband and I right now, he's 65 and he's retiring. It's frightening right now. So I'm asking this board to please consider stabilizing this rent, a percentage that we can afford, we can look forward to. And, you know, you can decide at that point whether or not you need to look for somewhere else to live, another state, another place, because you know your rent's going to increase 5%, 4%, hopefully. So that's my spew. Anybody have any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. You said that you are charged an amenities fee. What is covered under that amenities fee?
Oh, all right. So I'm going to speak honestly what is supposed to be there. So if what we're getting now or what it's supposed to be. So what we're getting now is nothing. So what we're to look forward to in the future is our swimming pool would be open and we could go to the pool, which hasn't opened in a year and a half, because this past summer, we didn't have a lifeguard. And the summer before that, we had a lifeguard that was there for maybe 2-3 weeks. And then that was it, the pool closed and it hasn't reopened. The other thing is they're working on a gym that from what I understand, has the construction of that is frozen. And also there's a dog park that they just put in, which is a stony piece of area where you can take your dog and throw, toy or something with the dog. And, dogs like to go on grass. So I don't understand it. But, and then there's the children's tot lot where they get to play on so the dogs are covered and the kids are covered. They don't pay rent. We're the adults that are paying the rent. We have nothing. All right. So I hope that answered that question.
And just to be clear, you said that which you're paying the amenities fee for has not been delivered to you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Teresa, are any of the amenities that you're talking about specified in your lease?
So my lease is here in front of me. It's due to be signed the 1st of November. So of course I've opted not to do such until the board makes a decision, because if there's so to answer your question, I think the dog park is in there. I think the dog park is in there. It's not in yours. Well, I just printed mine out tonight because I wasn't going to look at it at all because I knew the numbers.
And is this amenities fee optional? And what would be, if not, what would be the consequences of you not paying it?
I can't
it's in your
honestly
lease.
answer that question because I haven't addressed the management regarding it. I really wanted to be here tonight so that I would speak intelligently with the management when I went there. So I'm not sure whether we can opt out of it. If anybody knows that, I'd like to know that right now. Okay, so yeah. And I remember that with the trash butler, they said regardless of whether you put your trash outside your door and use the trash butler, you still had to pay the fee. So it would make sense that they don't want us to opt out of the amenities. You're welcome.
I would recommend that you document the rent changes over the last couple of years and send that in specifically to the board. And also in New York State, just as an aside, in New York State, you can't be evicted for non-payment of fees, but I'm sure the people at Legal Services would love to, could give you more guidance on that.
Yeah, if they cut off our services, I'm right where I am right now. None. Just they cut off the services. Yeah, right.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, Teresa. Stephanie Sickler, and then I don't have another sign-in sheet. So other people who want to sign in to testify, I would love if you could sign in and bring me the piece of paper.
Yeah, Stephanie, okay. Stephanie, and my last name is Sickler, Sickler. Okay, good evening, everyone. Microphones make me very nervous. I'll start there. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. I'm a local property manager. I don't own any buildings, and I've consistently positioned myself in between landlords and tenants to try to mediate any issues that they've had. I can't do it for the whole community, but I do it for anyone I'm involved with. And many things have been pointed out today, so I won't reiterate any of those, what you've already heard from landlords or tenants. I would like to bring up to the Rent Guidelines Board. I think it's imperative that there is some sort of liaison or agency or some office that tenants can go to if they need to file these reports, violations on the buildings, maintenance not being taken care of. I think usually that's the main point, that a lot of tenants, when they're unhappy or they do see any kind of rent increase, that's usually why they're not willingly, easily signing a renewal. So I think something of that sort is very, very important. I know we talk a lot about the past, but I do know that there are 1,000 new units being proposed, and I do think that is a bigger solution to this problem, this housing problem in Kingston. So hopefully things will change on a much larger scale in the next several years. And as for the rollback period, I would suggest that it is only 1 year. And the reason of that being that the good cause eviction came in February. By the time all of this is decided, and even someone could serve a new renewal with any increase, it'll be spring of 2024. So that being said, I think it should only roll back to the beginning of this year or about a 12-month period. And the point is that loans were underwritten for landlords to purchase these properties based on numbers in 17, 18, 19, 20, whatever year it was. So that would have a tremendous impact on that part of the real estate investment part of this. And also CapEx budgets, which is building improvements or apartment improvements, were also budgeted based on rents that were increased or that were increased as of now. And no one has really brought up any point of landlords putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars into these buildings, and I've personally seen it. Maybe not all of the buildings. I don't work with everyone in the community, but I can speak to seeing $15,000 to $40,000 going into vacant apartments when they're renovated. So these increases are to compensate and to pay back some of that. And that's why I think that the rollback period should be just the 1 year, and the rent increase should be in line with what New York City is doing now, or something similar, which I believe is 3.5% and 5% on a 2-year, just because just 6 months ago, or prior, about 8 months ago, before good cause eviction, landlords were well into any work that they were doing. We can't return our $20,000 boiler that we put in, and we can't unpaint the building that we just painted. And I say this as a property manager. You know, we can't rip off the new roof and give it back. You know, we still have to pay for that. So.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Sure.
Any questions?
How many ETPA units do you manage?
Just recently, it got bumped up to 60. Yeah.
I think he was asking specifically about ETPA. You're managing 60 ETPA units?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chelsea Villalobos and Ray Soto after her.
Chelsea Villalba, Chelseea, V as in Victor, ILLAL, B as in boy, A. I was gonna stick this on, but I'm having trouble with the sticker, so I'm just gonna hold it on here for you. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Chelsea Villalba y hay un ajuste de cuentas en este momento. Good evening, my name is Chelsea Villalba and there's a reckoning happening right now. All across this continental landmass, including in so-called Ulster County and especially in the so-called city of Kingston, seeds of economic and social greed have been sown for decades, disguised as economic development, revitalization, and an overall boon to the communities that live here. I don't know who benefits from gentrification, let's call it what it is, but it is not the people making $15 to $20 an hour or less, and it is certainly not the people who are living in abject poverty. And as much as our society is used to turning a blind eye to poverty, it is clear that it is not going anywhere. Poverty in Kingston continues to grow, and as it does, one cannot help but think, man, do those city hall folk not give a damn about the humans sleeping on concrete in abandoned buildings and in homes facing eviction? I have had conversations with people who work full-time jobs, desperate for legal assistance because their landlord is raising their shabby apartment rent to an unaffordable rate. I am 24 years old. I am employed by the county and I can barely afford my rent every month, let alone a rising electric bill. Rent is over a third of my monthly income. Right now, I do not own a car and I own tens of thousands in student debt, despite proposed forgiveness. Yesterday, I had to take items out of my shopping cart and wait until payday this Friday because the cost of food has risen so much. I am privileged enough to have earned a master's degree, and yet I had to negotiate my rent down this past summer due to the inappropriate conditions of the apartment I currently inhabit. Because I cannot afford to pick up and move elsewhere. The building in Midtown that I live in is possessed by businessmen who own more than one housing corporation, one of which is based in Arizona. The building I live in is the ugliest house on the block, and though it is my home, it is by no means a pleasant living experience. I have 7 drafty windows that require high heat on at all times, lest we freeze these winter months. It doesn't take $400 a month to heat less than 500 square feet, yet that's what I paid on more than one occasion to Central Hudson last winter. Not to mention how unsustainable and terrible for the environment these older buildings are as they are. There is trash all over the backyard. The people who say they own the buildings that the poor and working poor of the Kingston area live in are slumlords. What you decide here will not help me now, but it will help others who are less fortunate than myself. If you do not put in guidelines that make living here affordable, you are enabling the inequity and destruction of the community that makes Kingston, Kingston. If you do, know that this is only the beginning, and I hope you are qualified to sit where you are to bring the massive change needed. When I speak about gentrification, I speak from experience. I was born and raised on Long Island, yet for years I couldn't find an affordable place to live. There, a single room in a family home with awkward kitchen access, no private bathroom, and no private entrance can cost $700 a month. I know because I've paid it, and the next month I was unhoused, despite the fact that I have been working and holding a job since age 14. I see the same thing happening in Ulster, from exorbitant Airbnbs that no one in this room can afford to stay in for a week, to shoebox units uptown and downtown that go for almost $2,000 a month. The lack of respect for human life is appalling and unforgivable.
Thank you,
Let me
Chelsea.
be clear. Housing ownership is not Social Security. It is not a retirement fund. It is not a stock, nor is it a savings account. Housing is essential to all persons in order to live a life with dignity.
Thank you so much,
We have been
Chelsea.
brainwashed by the real estate lobby to believe that a single person or corporation or LLC has the right to dictate who lives where and for how much. I'll leave you with this. As public servants, do your job and support people, not profit, because in a future where you sold out communities for street cred with slumlords, they won't protect you from the wrath of the people you blighted.
Thank you,
They
Chelsea.
will remember your actions and behaviors clearly, and I and others in this room will make sure of that. By the way, this public forum is data. Every person speaking here now represents their neighbors, blocks, thousands of people who cannot be here tonight because they are working their butts off to keep a roof over their kids' heads. And just a reminder, juntos lo podemos todo. Thank you.
Any questions? Questions? No. Thank you, Chelsea. Ray Soto.
Ray Soto, SOTO. I speak for the many at 305 Hurley Avenue. In 2020, I was looking to downsize from my apartment in New York City. My rent was close to 60% of my income. And I love the city because there was, like we say, you know, the entertainment part of it. You support restaurants, you have public transportation. My wife, who would come to the Catskills many years, said, well, why don't we try Kingston? So we did. And when I had a hard time looking for apartments. I started coming to Kingston in the city here area, and some of the real estate people would say, oh, we need to bring Kingston up to market like New York City. And I said, really? And I said, but some of the housing stock here is really low. And I looked at some of the apartments and they weren't really that renovated. So I said, okay. So we kept looking and we found 305 Hurley, and we ended up taking the apartment, even though the landlords at the time, which were called E&M, they really didn't they said they were going to clean the rugs, paint and do things, and they really didn't do anything by the time we ended up moving in. So we said, okay, low rent, we'll stay here. My rent was then due the next year, and now it was Greystar, and I went to the office to negotiate, because as a tenant, that's what we typically do, right? We talk to the landlord, we communicate, just like many of the small landlord businesses. And I said, hey, look, this rent it's more than what I paid in New York City. New York City, we had rent stabilized apartments. We paid 2% for 1 year and 2.5% for 2 years. And I said, well, why can't you offer me a 2-year lease? He says, we're not offering 2-year leases. And I said, well, here I see that it's 10% increase. I said, I've never paid 10% in any place that I've rented. And he says, well, this is Kingston. It's privatized. So I said, okay, well, why don't we negotiate? So he says, well, they asked me like, how much did I want to pay? I said, 5%. And he goes, oh, well, why don't we choose 7.5%? And I said, okay, I'll take it. Fine. So that was my rent for 2021. So in August, we have Stony Run that now comes in to play. Some of the fixed costs that we had for the apartments remained, like the garbage. I was paying $10 a month for garbage, and then they added another garbage can to the process, and they jacked it up to $25. So like some of the tenants said, we pay for sewage, we pay for water, we pay for garbage. That's apart from rent, from base rent. So I received this beautiful offer letter that comes to me, and they said, well, my lease doesn't expire until December, but in August, I get this letter that says if you sign now before August 20th, you'll pay this amount. And I said, I went to the real estate person, to the office, and I said, this is almost like 20%. And she said, no, it's 18.5. I said, okay. So I said, well, I don't want to pay that rent. And he goes, well, listen, if you pass by, so the letter said, if you go beyond the 20th, then it'll be 30% when we calculated it. And if you miss that, because my lease begins December 1st, and I need to have a lease by November 1st, they said, if you miss that 1031 and you don't sign any of it, you're going to go into a month to month, which would be $2,200 a month. That's almost more than what I would pay in New York City. So I said, so I wasn't the only one. We live in an entrance. I'll cut it short. And all the tenants were coming to me for some reason, and they were saying like, Ray, are you getting this? So through communication, we got to find out that everything was inconsistent. Some people didn't even get raises. Other people got 10%. Other people got 7. Other people got 14. So what I'm trying to say is that the board really needs to look back, I think, a minimum of 3 years. Especially with the 305 Hurley, because there's been 3 landlords in the last 3 years. And we have to look back. And I think for 305 Hurley is an exception maybe to other places, but I think they need to roll back and there needs to be a rent reduction.
Thank you. Wait, stick around.
So under that 18.5% increase, were there any changes in that lease that would warrant that jump? Did they offer to repaint your apartment or anything? Or
No.
did you see an 18.5% increase in service from that?
Right. There was nothing said. What the new lease had, which I looked at, is again, an amenities which they added that wasn't in the prior year's lease. And that was an increase of $65. And there was no actual definition of what that amenity is. I didn't say it was for a pool, for the dog run, that wasn't nothing, none of that.
So you would say that you got an 18.5% increase with no recognizable increase in service.
Exactly. You have the apartment as you see it and as you have it. One of the things that I've had problems, which I've since day one, I said to them about, because many of the apartments in 305 Hurley, you feel like you're in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They're all rugged. They have sliding doors and central cooling and heating. So I said, look, this carpet is like really old. I said, are you guys going to do something about it? He says, yeah, we'll clean it. So they didn't really do much. The next year, they said, no, when they were renovating the apartments, we said, I said, look, what does it take for you to put in the floor and to replace it? He says, well, we can move you into another apartment and you can have that for like $1,800 a month. And I said, no, I don't want that. I'll keep my rug for now. But there were nothing. The increases were just on paper. And I think what happens is that when housing is privatized, it really cuts out the low-income people. It really does. And to answer the gentleman, the landlord, when he talks about New York, I've been living in New York City for 59 years. So when you tell me that the city got worse when landlords were no longer making money, that's a big lie. Because the reason why New York City thrived was because of the stock of housing that was available. I mean, people could actually live. Once the housing became privatized and people and landlords were able to reach that $2,000 limit that Bloomberg set years back and took people out of rent stabilization and put them at a market rate, that's when the city started to decline. So I would disagree with that landlord.
Thank you so much, Ray. Yeah, Gene.
I'd ask you if you could submit in writing to the board, if you want to share that letter and specific documentation of the rent changes that you've had, and also employ your neighbors to do the same.
Right.
Thank you.
Definitely. And the other thing I wanted to add is that Stony Run is very good at automating things. I mean, I'm a technology person, so I do a lot of online work. Stony Run sets up, they have an online website. You can do your payments online. You could submit maintenance requests. Some of the categories are not that clear because you can't say you can't really like define specific areas where you want the improvement to go. So one of the things is that I've done is I've submitted maintenance requests. I did it during Greystar, and apparently those requests never rolled over to Stony Run. So the tracking and the record keeping is very poor. And I think once we reach the point where we're rent stabilized, we will be able to have records of past rent history, which we don't have at the moment. We'll be able to track services that we could actually hold the landlord accountable, or the rental management agency accountable for the repairs. So yes, I will provide documentation, and I'm glad that we're having these discussions here in Kingston.
Thank you
Power
so much,
to the
Ray.
people.
There is nobody else signed up to speak. So if we're done, unless someone wants to, I haven't called your name. So yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mark Guido, Guido. Born and raised in Kingston, moved to Albany in '74. Bought my house on Maiden Lane in '79 and owned it since then. I done brand new appliances when my tenants have problems. I've have long-term tenants, and I only want to say to the board that please take into consideration the fact that like a lot of people made references to taxes, water, and insurance going up, and along with utilities. One of the things I want to say is my taxes when I bought the building were close to $3,000 a month, and now they're over $18,000 or $3,000 a year, excuse me. Now they're over $18,000 a year. So based on just that percentage alone, my rent should be $4,000 or $5,000 a month. And as far as the rollback goes, I wish you could call Central Hudson up and say, roll back Central Hudson's rates to what they were 3 years ago. We don't have that option. I supply heat to 3 of my apartments. I never had any complaints about heat. My furnace works fine, but the obviously, as you guys all know, with everything that goes up, so does the water bill. My water bill was next to nothing. Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, my water bill was next to nothing when I bought the building. It was no problem. All my purchases and all my improvements were based on certain things that were all went crazy. We've all experienced IBM here and gone, and now it's coming back again. And I've lived through the bad times and the good times. When you look at the board, when the board looks at the increases and the different things, you have to take that into consideration. I make money on my building, I got to admit, but I also just put a $9,000 roof on 9 squares. That's $1,000 a square. It used to be $300 a square to put a roof on. You know, these things need to be considered when you look at your overall expenses on the building. You know, maintenance on the building, parking lot plowing, insurance is crazy. You know, that you don't have a choice. You have to keep insurance. Liability insurance, tenants get, you know, it's problems. Fortunately, I haven't had any, but you have insurance. And these things keep going up. And you can't roll the insurance back, you can't roll the taxes back, and you cannot roll the water back. So I wish the board, when you look at these things, please take that into consideration. You know, I'd love if you could, but we can't. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it. Sorry I didn't sign up.
Thank you so much, Mark. Any questions?
Can you state your address again?
Pardon me?
Your address, the address,
My address is 18 Maiden Lane.
but the apartment,
Pardon me?
the building you own?
Yeah, 18 Maiden
Oh,
Lane.
okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I live in Albany. It's 160 Quail Street. I don't even fall under this preview here. I only have 5 units, you know, but I'd love to see things improve in Kingston. My rents are real cheap. My tenants even tell me that, and I have no intentions of raising them. You know, I have 2 vacant apartments. I can't find people to do work on these apartments. I have to do it myself. So I'm forced to leave them vacant until I get time to do it. And I'm still not going to raise the rent that much. And my apartments are nice. So please, I know you got a lot of people in here who have bad landlords and things like that, but not all of us are bad landlords. You know, my neighbor, Mike, was the first guy to speak. He tries his best. You know, I had trees knocked down, came out of my pocket, $5,000 with that last windstorm. No, you know, nobody, you know, I didn't have a choice. I had to clean them up because they were in the driveway. You know, these are expenses that we have that unfortunately, unless you're a real landlord, you don't see them all. So please take that in consideration. Any other questions? Oh,
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark.
okay. Thank you for the extra time.
And thank you. Oh, all right, one more.
My name is Don Pesciata. I'm from Stony Run. I just want to add a couple of things on to one of my co-tenants about this. Hello? Oh, okay. Anyhow, I want to know if this Pesciotta. Okay. My question is to the board. Could you guys take on this amenities things that we got going on in Stony Run? Because that's the big problem. The rent should be rolled back. It should be cheaper. But this amenities, these guys are going to keep checking it off each year. Oh, we can't raise the rent that much, but let's pack another $100 on the amenities. Is that legal? The amenities are, like the lady said, a pool. A lot of people don't use it. The gym that's got a Kingston stop work order on it because they probably doing loop construction in there. I don't know. A dog run. I don't have a dog. A little park that ain't worth the crap. Cutting the grass, I was told. Now they tacked on, she didn't mention it, $50 per car to park. I'm sure they're going to throw in the snow removal. So I like to ask, is that a legal thing that they can get away with each year? Can you investigate that? Amenities. And that took place, as far as I know, October, it started. For any new tenant and anybody that renews their lease, you're going to pay amenities. It's bullshit. That's all.
Thank you so much, Don. This board is empowered to ask questions, so we may take that question to our colleagues at DHCR and see if we can get an answer. One more speaker, and so I would love if you could spell your name for us.
My name is Wayne, W-A-Y-N-E. Last name is Cooper, C-O-O-P-E-R, Jr. So, I'm pretty much going to echo a lot of what was said regarding Stony Run and the rent increases. Okay. I do agree that the rent increases do not appear to come with any additional benefits or services. We, in my home, have actually been in a situation last year where we had no air conditioning from May to October. No compensation for it. They did give us 2 standing air conditioners, which doesn't really help in an apartment. Okay, and our baby was just born, so that was a little bit stressful. Also, it seems like they're intentionally waiting people out. For instance, I have a neighbor downstairs, okay? I know what her apartment looks like because I went in her home to service her home. That's what I do. I go into people's homes. Unfortunately, she passed away. They renovate the place. Family members of mine move in right below us into this lady's apartment. We go in and it looks like a brand new apartment. So it looks like they're waiting people out to fix things that they should have fixed before. And that seems a little shady to me. Okay. I don't know if this matters, but it's a point of contention for me. They've removed the playground for this dog park. So now, you know, we have to put our 2-year-old in the car and take her somewhere so people's dog can poop, which is nonsense to me. There's no playground on the facility at all. There were 2, now there's none. The pool, we haven't been able to use it for damn near 2 years, excuse my language, but we haven't, okay? There's a lot that we don't get. And respectfully, and I really do mean it respectfully, I'm happy that, you know, some of you are good landlords, and you should be, but, you know, we don't generally get credit for doing the right thing. I don't get credit for not killing somebody when they tick me off. The right thing is the right thing. So I do appreciate you all, but you have people, the young lady said she had more roommates than she ever had. Well, again, respectfully, I'm sure you didn't jump into the landlord game on a whim. You did research. You knew that there were going to be expenses. You're not just there to collect. You have to put out, right? So, you know, maybe this sounds snarky, but I still mean it respectfully. Maybe you guys can go in with each other like we have to go in with roommates. Split those costs because it's tough for us. My rent went up every year since I've been there, and I've been there almost 5 years, okay? My pay doesn't go up like that. So it's not fair.
Thank you so much, Wayne. I really appreciate that. Any questions? Right, it is 8:34. Do I need a motion to conclude? Or can I just say that we're done? I'll entertain a motion to close the proceedings. What's the word? Adjourn, thank you. Great, so to adjourn this meeting, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, Junior has motioned, Carol has seconded, and let's call roll, I guess. Michael.
Aye.
Carol. Aye. Diana.
Aye.
Noah, aye.
Aye.
Mia says aye.
Aye.
Mike says aye.
Aye.
Junior and Tara all say aye. It passes and we're done. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your coming out and staying for this long length of time. Thank you so much to our colleagues at the City of Kingston and our colleagues at DHCR. We could not, this is a Herculean feat, and I'm so glad to have your company in it. And also, of course, to my colleagues on the board. Thank you.